Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well this evening. It's a real pleasure to have landscape architect Sean Ryan, who's on the board of the Friends of the Olmsted Beal House here tonight. Sean's going to share some of his invaluable knowledge with us about landscape architecture, Mr. Olmsted, etc., etc. So I just wanted to note that we are at the Kaasmann House on Highland Boulevard, and today's date is January 6th, 2021. Thanks so much for being here tonight, Sean. Our first question is, what is landscape architecture and why is it important?
First I want to say thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to try and help such an important cause as trying to preserve and rehabilitate Frederick Law Olmsted's house. Let's see, the technical definition of landscape architecture is the art and science of planning, design, and management of creating outdoor spaces for human purpose in harmony with the environment. Poetic terms, I would say it's kind of like a magic. It gives you the ability to create a Garden of Eden. It can make the world a better place. It's a very misunderstood subject. But one quick thing I wanted to mention about landscape architecture, when Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux built Central Park, and it came time for them to resign and sign their letter of resignation, they couldn't figure out to call what they did when they built Central Park. And I looked up in the unabridged dictionary one time, there's a word called anomany, and that's the inability to name objects. And that's what kind of like landscape architecture is. Vaux thought it was an art, and this is the most interesting thing. Olmsted wanted to call what they did social engineering. He thought it was a social science, and that if you change people's environment, you could change their behavior. They never got to the bottom of it. The term landscape architect was used in Europe, and they just signed a letter that way, and that's how it's like got its name. But it's an incredible subject that's highly underutilized and can make the world a Garden of Eden, and Olmsted invented it. Okay?
All right. Why and how did you become a landscape architect?
I'll go through this briefly. My parents owned a lot of land. We in different states. Our most valuable piece of land is a block in front of a train station on the Raritan Valley line. It's about 13 miles outside of lower Manhattan. And they were, poor, came from the Depression, and my mother had the idea, well, let's, buy land and try and develop it. They had 5 sons. I was the youngest, and she told me, she said, Sean, they have a mechanical contracting business. And she said, Sean, don't go into the business. Go to school to learn about land and work with your brothers and try and make money. I went to Manhattan College for 2 years and majored in civil engineering. And let's see, during my civil engineering education, I came across this book and I said, oh my God, that's fascinating. What's this? And I found out it was called landscape architecture. And I said, boy, I want to learn how to do this, like instead of making bridges and sewer systems and stuff. And they had a program at Rutgers. I signed up there. And this is the interesting thing about the story is that I thought, oh, well, I just passed, first semester calculus, in engineering school. This landscape architecture thing is going to be like easy in comparison to engineering. But actually, when I got there and got into it, it was actually harder, much, much harder. Because in landscape architecture, you have to use both sides of your brains simultaneously, the mathematical side and the artistic side. In balance. And in planting design, for instance, was the first semester I'm there, I'm, thinking like an engineer. There's 4 projects in the semester, and you get a grade each, and, that's your grade. I got 2 Fs on the first 2 projects, and I got 2 As on the last 2 projects. And Roy DeBoer, he's the first landscape architect in New Jersey, the program director. He said, Sean, I've had, very few students who've been able to pull this off. But what it was, I was just thinking like an engineer, and in the middle, and all the trauma and trying to pass the class, like it occurred to me, oh my God, you have to use both sides of your brain. So I don't know, it's a lot of people are educated and they're just micro-focused in one a way of looking at the world or another. But if you were like a wealthy person and wanted just an education to learn about the world or philosophy or different things, landscape architecture would be a great choice because it forces you to think about things in 2 different ways. I think that's one of the greatest values of the education. Okay?
Sure. What impact did Frederick Law Olmsted have on landscape architecture?
Now, I can't emphasize the answer to this question enough. The thing that Olmsted did that was so important, they've been making gardens for thousands of years, Rome, China, Greece, all over the world. But nobody had a formula like how to do it. And it was kind of, you're a king or France or something, and something random happened, and you got a beautiful garden that was wonderful, but it was just hit and miss. Nobody actually figured it out. And what Olmsted did, and it started with Central Park, and he started to figure out landscape architecture. But one of the most important things he did was he started the first landscape architecture program in the world at Harvard University. I think it was 1905, sometime in the early 1900s. And the second landscape architecture program in the world was Cornell University. But the magical thing that Olmsted did, and what is so important and how it influences the world so much, is he figured out a way to just take a kid out of high school, send him to college for 5 years, and they can create landscape architecture. And I can't do justice to what landscape architecture is. Maybe one thing. The city on Earth or the country on Earth that has the most landscape architecture, more than any other country, is South Korea. You should all go to Google Images sometime and type in South Korea landscape architecture, and it would just blow your mind, all the gardens and green roofs and beautiful streets and, parks and wonderful places. And again, that's what inspires myself and many landscape architects. The world could be so beautiful. It doesn't have to be garbage and crime and suffering and sadness, and I don't know. It's I had a friend one time, and he said to me, Sean, you're like Don Quixote. You're an idealist. But I disagree with that. If people recognize what landscape architecture was and they put them in charge, this magic could happen all over the world, and I believe someday it will.
Number 4, what landscape architecture styles did Frederick Law Olmsted create?
This is a tricky one, and I brought some pictures, and this has helped me over the years to explain things to people. The picture's worth 1,000 words. Of all the garden styles in history, it's kind of the Eastern garden styles, Japan and China, and they're more naturalistic, but they're symbolic, of nature. And then there's the Western garden styles, Europe, and Most of the European styles are formal and geometric, like Versailles or the Italian hillside gardens. They're geometric. They're very easy to understand. Olmsted became interested in the English Romantic idea of garden design. And even with his house, the curved driveway, the scenery, etc., etc., he thought that was the ultimate garden design idea, and could affect people. He thought that people were exposed to beauty and scenery, they would feel better personally. This is Stourhead in England, and it's a classic example of an English Romantic park. And the funny thing about it is, these rich, people like in England at the time, this is a painting from the 1600s, Claude Lorraine. And if you look at both of them together, you'll notice the similarity between the two. These wealthy people in England set up their property so it was like you were walking through a museum and experience a planned series of views like you were looking at some painting. And I always point this out to people. This is Stourhead. That's a man-made lake. These are all planted bushes. The bridge here, it's a fake bridge. There's not a path or a road. The bridge is just put there for scenery. And it's like the temple and everything. And that's what makes Olmsted Parks so hard to understand and manage and deal with. This is the Great Lawn in Central Park, and people look at this and they don't realize, this was a quarry, a junkyard, slums. This is totally fake and man-made. And my work with Union County, I was their landscape architect for 20 years. It's a 5,000-acre Olmsted Fern Park system. I had to get into a lot of fights about trying to defend the Olmsted's design style. And that's where I think I got good. And getting into the mechanics. I had a fight with engineers, I had a fight with union people, I had a fight with politicians, and for instance, they just look at like something like the Great Lawn and think, oh, that's just an empty space in the middle of nowhere. And they'll go in, they'll rip it up, they'll put an artificial turf field in, and they'll ruin the whole design. And the funny part about this is that in Union County, it's all 9 freeholders are Democratic for like 25 years in a row now. But Olmsted called these open spaces Democratic American public spaces, because his idea was, with the social engineering, New York City was a city of immigrants, and there was Italian neighborhood, Polish neighborhood, whatever neighborhood. But he thought if there was these open spaces, these democratic open spaces, everyone would come there together, and they would start to see themselves as Americans versus being one country or another. And again, he felt it was a social science. But Olmsted, he used this English Romantic style. And the sociology, he thought a lot about like democracy and how to make society like healthier. He had a lot to do with the United States of America, designed the Capitol, was head of the Sanitary Commission in the Civil War, which became the Red Cross. Incredibly civic-minded. Okay.
Great.
Okay, I'd like to hand things over now to my fellow board member, Paula Tramontano.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a question for you. Which of Frederick Law Olmsted's projects is your favorite?
That's a very good question. Obviously Central Park is what, created his fame, and but in studying Olmsted, he and Vaux felt that their greatest project was Prospect Park in Brooklyn. They said that, you know, Central Park was their first try and they got the mistakes out, and Prospect Park was where they pulled everything like together. And this is very good, and it's interesting how this is tying together. Prospect Park, remember, you're in the middle of Brooklyn, you know, a highly, you know, industrialized landscape. The Long Meadow, it's 2 miles long. You can't even, you know, you're on one side of it, you can't even see around like that. You have this like illusion that you're, you know, out in the country. And I asked my history teacher, Connie Webster at Rutgers, one time in history class. I said, what do you mean, you know, romantic park? Can you define that like for me? And she told me, well, romance is when you see something more than actually like exists. It seems bigger than like reality. And there you go, you know, the Long Meadow on Prospect Park. Like, wow, I can't see around the edge. Like, how far does it go? It's romantic. It's bigger than, you know, real life. I just, that's an important thing about this style and the ideas behind it. And the last thing I'd say about favorite parks is, this is Union County, New Jersey. I don't have a map of, you know, the New York City region with me. This was the centerpiece of the Olmsted's Union County Park system. Dr. Beveridge, the main Olmsted scholar in the world, from American universities, wrote 12 volumes of the Olmsted papers. A friend of mine, he told me that the firm went over 100 years, over 3,000 projects. There's a whole bunch of like involved with it. But he said the Olmsteds always had this dream of creating a county scale park system that had parkways, parks, and boulevards. And Union County was one of their last projects, but one of their greatest achievements. It was right before the Depression. They got 6 giant parkways, the Rahway River, etc. They got tons of land, 5,000 acres, and then the Depression hit, they ran out of money, and a lot of the parks weren't able to be finished. Anyway, this park, Warrenco Park, their centerpiece, Dr. Beveridge, most of the work on Union County was done by the landscape architect Percival Gallagher, who was part of the firm, the Olmsted firm. Dr. Beveridge tells me that he was one of their most talented landscape architects. I think he did stuff in Washington, D.C. around the Lincoln Memorial and whatnot. But the sad thing about his life is that he died at a young age. So there was, a lot more that he could have given to the world. But anyway, he did this Warrenco Park, and it captures all the ideas of the Olmsted design philosophy in a single standing, I think this is 200 acres or so, Elizabeth and Roselle, New Jersey, also very urban. I don't have, me and my friends, we don't have proof for this, but if you look at Central Park, if you look at Prospect Park, and you look at Warrenco Park, they're in a perfect triangle. And many people think this is the greatest Olmsted park in the entire state of New Jersey, and they might have made it to match those 2 other parks. I don't know. There's no park commission, there's no conservancy, it's not on the register. It's, looks like a Disneyland that went out of business 50 years. It's the fountains, the gardens, the water, they're not there, but the land is still there, and maybe someday this will get on the register and be rehabilitated like Central Park or Prospect Park. So, okay,
We're good.
Along here.
We're good. Would you say that landscape architecture is important in urban settings, and if so, why?
Yes, and just briefly again, what I mentioned, Olmsted, wanted to call the subject social engineering. He thought it was a social science. And just ask yourself the question: what would New York City be like if it, it didn't have Central Park in the middle of it to act as a civilizing like force? You watch the movie Blade Runner, where there's just hundreds of miles of endless urban environment, and it's this social component, this decompression chamber where to make people relax, feel happy, a sense of well-being. You can't underestimate how important landscape architecture is in an urban environment. And just real quickly, the social sciences and whatnot, there's different areas within landscape architecture. There's an area called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And they come up with all these ideas, then, by changing the environment, how you can reduce crime. Like in a bad neighborhood or whatever, they'll go put in a dog park, because people have to walk their dogs in the morning and at the night, every day. So if there's a people base in this bad neighborhood, well, the criminals go somewhere else. And there's all kinds of ideas to that. One last quick thing about landscape architecture in an urban environment is the ecological values of landscape architecture. Olmsted invented this thing about greenways, and the Emerald Necklace in Boston is most famous. But again, in New Jersey, this other park system, this is Union County, and you can see the series of parkways. But anyway, we live in a world with 200 species going extinct today, and they think they have reserves in Africa or whatever, and the elephants or whatnot are protected, but they think the answer to stop species extinction is create greenways. And in Florida, there's a few Florida panthers. They build a tunnel under the highway so they can get to different places. But anyway, in terms of, the urban environment, sociology, ecological health, again, it's this greenway idea, and, who invented it? Olmsted, that's why he's such a genius, okay?
Yeah, so what would you say is the significance of Tasmak Farm?
You can see how important I believe Olmsted is, and I think when 500 years from now, when they go back in time, if we're still here and look at all the humans that ever walked the face of the earth, I think he's going to be there with Plato, Aristotle, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton. I think he's that important of a person. So with his house being here as a historical artifact, it makes his memory and his ideas much more important. And then also, without getting into specifics, the scenery, the curved driveway, the hydrology, the horticulture, just a lot of different things he did on this site. It developed the mechanics of what became the science of landscape architecture. And then two other things briefly as I've been thinking about this. One of the most important things I think about the site is he started out as trying to have a farm, and he failed, but he didn't give up. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons of landscape architecture in Olmsted, is that Olmsted tried his whole life. He tried things, he failed. He tried, he failed. He tried, he failed. But he never gave up. And eventually he was successful, and he changed the world for the better. You all know the idea that that's the very important value to have as a human being. And one last thing I'd like to say, it said that he developed his design skills here. And one of the important things about landscape architecture, I believe, is you got to remember that Olmsted didn't do this alone. He did it in partnership with Calvert Vaux. Landscape architecture is a team sport. It's a group phenomena. It's like a wolf pack. You know, a wolf can't take down a buffalo, but if they all work together, they can do something that's, you know, bigger than like all of them. And landscape is such a complex medium that is worked on by countless human and natural forces. You don't have much of a chance of success unless you work together as a team. And I don't know, Olmsted and Vaux here, his life, I think, you know, design skills and teamwork are another valuable lesson. Okay?
So what significance does this site have for you personally, and why are you on the board of the Friends of the Olmsted Beal
Well,
House?
I, you know, talked about the significance of the site, and, you know, why I'm on the board is I'm an educated, licensed landscape architect, and I have a certificate in historic preservation from Drew University, and I'm Hal's liaison for the state of New Jersey. That's the Historic American Landscape Survey. They're trying to define all the cultural landscapes in the United States. I have a background in historic preservation landscape architecture. And, you know, without getting into the mechanics, this is Bryant Pond Park in Summit, New Jersey. There was a big fight getting it on the historic register, and spaces and views and entrances and buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Again, my job at Union County, and I still try and help Union County. I had a fight with engineers, politicians, union people, and when you have to fight for something, you have to learn it really well. You just can't like skim over it. So I have a deep and sincere understanding about Olmsted and his landscape architecture principles. And then something else that's worth saying is that without getting philosophical, I believe we have a soul. I don't know the exact, mechanics, but I always, tell the truth. My heart is true. And I think a very good example of this is a historic preservation project I've been working on for 6 years. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection headquarters in New Jersey in Trenton. There's a courtyard in the middle of it. And in the 80s, they had a competition. They passed this Green Acres legislation, and it protected, millions of acres in New Jersey. And they wanted an artist to symbolize it. And the artist they chose was Athena Tacha. And she's world famous, and, made the Muhammad Ali Memorial and stuff all over. She's in like her 80s. We've been working for 6 years. Christie was going to knock it down. The Cultural Landscape Foundation put it on their list. It was saved. He wouldn't come up with money for it. When Murphy came in, he said, "Okay, well, we're gonna rehabilitate it. It would be done by now, except for COVID-19. But they're getting the bids out and everything." But the reason I mention this is, like, Athena, she's this like great artist, and it's like a very important project. But I'm the only landscape architect on planet Earth that she trusts, and everything that happens in the site, she makes go through me, and so I'm sincere at how I do this. And we'll just run through the last couple.
Yeah, I'm going to pass questioning over to Tina Kaasmann-Dunn.
I'll be right with you. Right on the fire.
And she has a few questions left for you.
Sure.
I'll take Tina's first question.
Okay.
Which, if any, of Olmsted's landscape experiments at Tussamock Farm do you think would be important to recreate in the design of the site's landscape?
Well, the curved driveway, the walks through the woods, how he tried to hide stuff, the scenery, the hydrology, the characteristics of Olmsted Parks is they usually have a component of recreation, but that was in the 20s. I don't know, this doesn't seem like an active recreation place, but in historic preservation, there's a couple of standards, preservation, rehabilitation, etc., and I don't know how you would go about doing it. That's when we go through the whole process, but they say, well, 25% of the original site was woodland, so maybe we should have a little patch of woods. We should think about like scenery. And again, you go through this site planning process, the site plus program equals land use plan, then you make your design from that and construction drawings, whatever. And even symbolically, we only have 1.7 acres to represent the original over 100 acre site. So we will go through the process and try and represent the important concepts of the site. What makes the project a little bit complicated is the site is owned by the New York City Parks Department. Me, Carl, and Jeff could do some of the legwork. The best Olmsted restoration landscape architect on the planet is Fay Harwell of Roadside Harwell, and she lives with Dr. Beveridge, the main Olmsted scholar. They'd probably be the best people to do it, but politically how we would get them in the middle of it is tricky. But anyway, there's stabilize the building, use the process, follow the Secretary of Interior standards, and organize the site. And the thing I like about historic preservation is it's all calculated for 500 years into the future. Not many people think that way.
Okay. All right. Tell us about the trees that Olmsted planted that are still thriving on the property. How exciting is it for you to see them?
Well, without getting into botanics and the specifics or whatever, I think this makes a very good point about Olmsted, and this is what I would say. When Olmsted built Central Park, like the mall in Central Park with the elm trees that leads up to Bethesda Terrace, when he planted them, they were this big. He never saw them, how he envisioned them. And there's kind of like a magic somehow about park building. And I've often thought about this, that the guys that made Warnaco Park, they're not even alive anymore. I'm here now, I'm working on it, and people that are going to work on it in the future haven't even been born yet. Like, boy, how does that work? That 3 different generations of human beings it can coordinate, and work together, even though they never even get to talk to each other. So I think, to be a person that plants a tree and thinks in the future, there's sort of like a magic to it. I don't know how to put it, but Olmsted saw that, and I think it's a value for all of us to try and duplicate and emulate.
Well, to go along with that, what is your vision for the landscape of the Olmsted Beale Park in 5 years?
It's very expensive to do historic preservation, but the money can be raised. The structure is one thing. This is a project I drew about, how to restore a structure, et cetera, et cetera. That, there's a process to it. The landscape is different. First it has to be inventoried, stabilized, a program that's goals and objectives put together, and then we figure out land use, mechanics, and then the construction. I think the most important thing for the site is for the identity to be strong. And that way it will last, hundreds of years into the future. Again, my history professor, Connie Webster from Rutgers University, she was on the state board for a long time, just retired, but one of the statements that I always remember her saying is a well-drawn plan has a funny way of rebuilding itself. So, if we can make a beautiful enough, good plan about this site here and the house, I think it has a much better chance to last hundreds of years into the future and to try and bring these Olmsted values to future generations.
Cool. How about climate change? What impact do you think that might have on the site?
Well, and that's the last question. I think I think it's well placed, and why I think 500 years from now, Olmsted might be on the list of the most important 100 people that ever walked the planet. Climate change technically, I had natural resource science at Rutgers in 1983. I've been scared to death ever since, how much population, how much soil, how much water, how much, I've been following the subject like an addicted sports gambler ever since, what's gonna happen? I have a little 15-year-old daughter, and I've been honest with her. The big problem we face with climate change is if we go up a little bit, couple more degrees, and 15, 20 years, the permafrost is going to melt. And that's been frozen for a million years, whatever. But it's all rotted vegetation, and it's methane. Methane is 20 times stronger than carbon dioxide as a heat trapping gas, and it's going to pass us past like a tipping point. The world seems to be getting very serious finally about climate change and what we face. If Greenland melts, which might happen, sea level will go up by 20 feet. If Antarctica melts, which they think won't, no matter how bad it gets, sea level would go up by 200 feet. We'd have no chance. I've talked to engineer friends, and they've explained to me that as long as the real estate value is higher than the flood control cost, they'll build flood control like Holland or whatever. They'll build a big wall out and by the Verrazano Bridge. I don't know, so it's my feeling is that the land will be preserved. They'll do something about it. And again, I said this before, and this is what I would end with, is that if the next 100 years are going to be very difficult for humanity. It might be the end of the civilization. It might be what point we reach sustainability and we go into the future. Well, the people make fun of me or whatever, but if we do reach sustainability and we do make it successfully into the future, I believe landscape architecture is going to be a central technology that gives us the tools to, reach sustainability and go as humans long into the future. And again, I'm, in awe that, this is Olmsted's house. That's why it's so important. And again, I'm honored to, be asked for help and try and work on such a important cause and meet friends and like-minded people. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank
Very
you.
good.